Hey, it's Kuwait Dun. In this video, I want to talk about user experience and really a little detail that I like to think about oftentimes. I both design and develop the app for Dun, and so a lot of times when I'm thinking about user experience, I have to think about it from two different vantage points, both as the developer, thinking about all the complexity involved, all the business logic, the constraints, and then from the designer point of view, thinking about what is the best experience for the user. And occasionally, I realize that the best option for the optimal user experience and the optimal development experience is to do nothing, to omit certain things that you may think you want to add to the app. So let me give you two quick examples of that. So this first example is about creating a new project. So you can see in this Dun account, I've got 3 projects and I'm going to create a 4th one. So I'll go in here and I'm going to name this one Clean. You saw that I had another project named Clean. I'll just go ahead and go through that, and then now I've got this new project. Now if I go back here, you'll see that I've got 2 of the same name project. So the developer in me thinks that we need to have validation here. So once I'm on create project, if I start typing in a name that is identical to an existing name, and let's say I focus out of it, that this should pop up some validation. In that case, then I've got to think about bringing back that list of names to the screen through the API at the moment the screen is rendered. Otherwise, I could be a little lazier about it, let things flow, and then at the moment of actually creating the project, then do the validation and then return an error if there is a similarly named project here as well. Then I start thinking about the actual scenario. How often are people going to name a project exactly the same twice? My gut tells me they're not going to very often. If they do, what's going to happen? Well, they'll eventually come back here and someone will notice that there are 2 different projects of the same name, and that might be confusing. They then might decide to go ahead and rename one of them. So I can do that pretty easily here. Or they decide that might be a scenario where multiple people were creating projects at the same time and they were just getting things stood up. Well, then somebody would go delete one of them. Neither of those 2 scenarios to me are particularly onerous in terms of an experience. And the other thing is the project name has no impact in terms of identity. We use IDs in the database to identify projects, so names have no implication in terms of their uniqueness. So when you sum up kind of that full story, the amount of work and the adjustments I need to make from a development point of view to handle the unique name validation versus the actual likelihood that that's going to happen, and if it does, the repercussions of it, that's where I start to evaluate, is it even worth it? In this case, I decided that it, in fact, isn't worth it to me to add any validation. And so that's just one case where adding logic, adding a little bit more complexity is not worth the return. So here's my second example, kind of along the same lines as the first, involves the naming of custom filters. So I'm in a project and here I've got one custom filter I've made called Mike's Assigned Tasks, and that just picks Mike as the assignee. If I were to add just anything else to it to change the things I'm selecting for this filter, it gives me the option to save it as a new filter. If I were to type Mike's Assigned Tasks again, you can see that it saves it. Now in this case, I don't just dupe it out, I overwrite the other filter that was Mike's Assigned Tasks. So this is a situation where, again, I could have decided to put validation here to disallow this, but I didn't. I wanted the UX to feel smoother. I wanted to eliminate some additional treatment I'd have to do on the UI side. And instead, I don't make a second version like I did with projects. I decide to simply overwrite the custom filter that was named the same originally and replace it with this one. So that's another design decision where it made sense to me to just rename it, overwrite the first one, because if they're naming it this way, they probably want this filter to have this state and they're not even thinking about the previous filter they had. But again, I'm thinking through the common scenarios when it does happen, what is the user's expectation, what are they probably trying to do, and also deciding not to add validation. Obviously, there's many places where you do want validation, but just wanted to showcase a couple cases where you might want to think about the eventual experience in a different way. Again, sometimes taking away the developer hat, the rigidity, and being a little bit more lenient, and think about a better way to create the outcome for the user.